0.9%. Visit us today at Lexus of Winter Park or LexusofOrlando.com.
Have to have safety, but at the same time, people want this country open. The people here want it open.
I think that we've achieved all the different milestones that are needed. So the government, federal government, rose to the challenge, and this is a great success story.
President Trump and his son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner turning the page on the messaging coming from the White House these days. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Anchor of the Daily Briefing, Dana Perino. Executive Director of the Serve America PAC, Marie Harf. And Guy Benson of Fox News Radio. Dana, the president and his team are clearly now pushing this "it's time to start reopening the country" narrative. But as we pointed out, not a single state has met, even though a bunch of states are reopening, and not a single state has met the White House gating guideline of 2 weeks of steady decline in new cases before you're supposed to go to phase one. And recent polls show that when people are asked to choose, they're more concerned about safety, even if it means staying sheltered for a while longer, than in reopening. At least that's what the public polls say. I guess my question is, how big a risk do you think the president is taking in pushing at this point as much as he is for reopening?
Well, it's a very interesting dance in a way that the president has to do from the very beginning, which was, how do you convince people to all work together to flatten the curve? And America really did respond quite well. And you saw that the curve's flattening in many places, but now there's a bit of a plateau. Well, what do we do if there's a plateau? And in the meantime, you have all of these people, you know, what you said earlier, Chris, 66,000 people who have died. And one of the things that's really on the hearts of the people who lost loved ones is that those people mostly had to die alone because of the social distancing guidelines. They couldn't be there to hold their loved ones' hands when they died. So there is grief on that end. But at the same time, there is no doubt the economy and the economic impacts of this are devastating. When you have car lines up to 6 miles in San Antonio for people to get food. These are people who were working through no fault of their own. They find themselves in this position. They probably never asked the government or a charity for help. And they're looking at this saying, there's no problems at my hospital, but doctors and nurses at our hospitals are being laid off because there's no elective surgeries. You just heard from Governor Murphy, who said that they're seeing that firefighters, police officers starting to be laid off in these states. So it's going to be very important for the president to figure out how to strike the balance. And I think there's one thing that they can do in terms of saying what a great job they've done so far, but they also need to be very clear-eyed with everybody in the country about the challenges that we face, because they are enormous.
Marie, let's talk about it, though, because you do see Republican governors pushing, moving to reopen their states. You do see these growing protests in the street. So, I mean, there is a push to get the country going again. And obviously the 66,000 people who have died, even the million with the new cases. But, you know, we're talking about 30 million people in the last 6 weeks who've lost their jobs.
It was so interesting hearing the governor of Mississippi talking about how when he got new data, he changed his plans when he had scheduled to reopen parts of the economy. So we are about to embark on a situation where we will see if people can, on their own, social distance, if people with, independent of government regulations or stay-at-home orders can act responsibly. And if they can't, and if we see spikes in some of these places, will these governors be willing to change course in midstream? That's something we will all see together in real time. But the bottom line is we still need more testing. We still need more contact tracing. We still need more therapeutic treatments. You heard Dr. Birx. We've heard Dr. Fauci talk about that. And so the economy, even if we open nail salons, hair salons, Chris, the economy isn't really going to get going again until we can travel, until we can move around the country. It will not get going again in a real meaningful way by opening small businesses in certain places. And so we have to get all of those things I just mentioned to eventually get to a place where the economy really can open back up. That is not happening anytime soon.
Here is one of the Republican governors, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, talking this week as he was starting to reopen his state. Take a look.
What is our biggest obstacle? Fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear sparked by constant doom and gloom and hysteria that has permeated our culture for the last 6 weeks.
Guy, you know, it's awfully interesting. As the virus begins to wane at least a little bit, we see, and maybe it's because people feel freer to do it, the politics starting to resume and to grow. And you've got red state governors, not all of them, and we just pointed out Tate Reeves, who made a switch when he saw the data of a spike in cases in Mississippi. But generally speaking, red state governors pushing more for reopening, blue state governors, Democrats talking more about leaving the restrictions on longer. It's a very interesting dichotomy, and it really follows a political breakdown.
Although there have been governors, Chris, on the Democratic side who were part of this first round of reopening efforts as well. So it's not perfectly red and blue. I think some of it is regional. I think some of it is based on the data that we heard Dr. Birx talk about, which is different in these various states. But I think the clip from Governor DeSantis, if you watch that entire speech that he gave, he was really juxtaposing the predictions of the numbers in Florida, which were horrific, versus the numbers that we're actually seeing in Florida, which are still very sad. Every death is horrible, but nowhere near what the projections had shown. And so I think he was saying we have to keep our heads, we have to keep things in proper perspective, and remember we were told that X, Y, and Z was going to happen. What we're seeing is A, B, and C. Let's try to balance this properly. I mean, it is awfully difficult, Chris, because you, of course, grieve for the 66,000+ Americans who have died. There are concerns that those numbers are still going up in certain areas more than others. But you talk to even small business owners who had thriving businesses, who did everything right and were doing everything well, and now they're wondering, can we ever reopen? What's going to happen to my life? What's going to happen to my employee's life? That is also a humanitarian crisis that is very acute for a lot of people who aren't sitting in studios like we are and who are looking every day very anxiously, when can this happen again? I think the biggest component is, when will the American people feel confident to reopen the economy? Because some of these businesses reopened and had very few customers because people still aren't confident. And this sort of juggling act continues, and it's